So hello everyone, my name is Amanda Palazzo. I'm a research scholar at IIASA. IIASA is for those who don't know, is a research institute in Austria situated outside of the city of Vienna. We have a long history of interdisciplinary research, and we conduct policy-oriented research into problems that are either too large or too complex to be solved by a single country or just one academic discipline. Before we dig into the Czech case study that we're going to present today, I wanted to share a little bit more about our integrated land use model, GLOBIOM. If you can switch to the next slide, please. So the Global Biosphere Management Model, or GLOBIOM, is a part of IIASA's Integrated Assessment Modeling Suite. More information about the model can be found on our webpage, globiom.org. The model itself, which is depicted here in a schematic figure, it's an economic land use model that covers the agriculture and forestry sectors, and also includes the bioenergy sector. The model considers international trade based on cost competitiveness for producers, which means that producers face different costs and prices for their crop and livestock products. It covers 18 crops and 6 livestock products. The model considers the biophysical and management productivities and profitabilities at a very high spatial resolution, and which this allows us to examine the impacts of local changes to the agricultural productivity. So this means we can look at the impacts of climate change, for example. The model also considers dynamic change in land use for different land use categories, such as agricultural land, so crop and pasture land, forest area, and other natural land. The model optimizes by maximizing the consumer and producer surplus under different model constraints, so different land constraints and supply constraints, and it solves from the year 2000 in a recursively dynamic way at a 10-year, usually at a 10-year time step. Next slide, please. So we use the model at different time periods for different purposes. For the initial decades of the model's solution, we validate the model results compared to different global and national statistics on production, on demand for different products, and also on land use change. Here you can see some highlights of the work that we've contributed to in the last years. And this includes policy impact assessments at the very near term, other impacts of the agriculture sector on climate change in the more midterm, and also developments of the agriculture sector with a focus on livestock, and also other numerous scientific exercises looking at the climate stabilization pathways. Can we have the next slide, please? So as maybe some of you are aware, GLOBIOM is the economic model that has provided a lot of background and information about the LULUCF related impact assessments of the European climate policies. And in this regard, we have a long history of providing support for DG Klima and DG Energy. This is going on for more than a decade. As you can see some of the information here. Next slide. Yep, please. Thank you. You are perfectly on time. We are also using GLOBIOM to support the work to look at the climate biodiversity nexus with DG Environment and to assess the synergies and trade-offs of land use policies for climate mitigation and also for biodiversity conservation. So next slide, please. So as Thomas presented already, we need these kinds of holistic tools like GLOBIOM for an ex-ante analysis to look at these synergies and trade-offs between the interconnected policy goals, because we know that transformational change is needed, and we know that the world is interconnected through trade. So the impacts and adaptations of large countries or large regions are felt by small countries and other regions across the world. And we know that the challenges and solutions also cut across different geographical scales. So that's why tools like GLOBIOM are very useful for this purpose. To come back to GLOBIOM, I wanted to highlight some of the modeling outputs that are available from our modeling tools. So we provide information at the global, regional, national, and subnational scale for crop and livestock production and different forest products, and also looking at the productivity of those different products at the different scales as well. We look at the changes in prices of those products, the consumer food demand, the livestock feed demand, and also the energy demand for different products. We look at the trade, which includes the imports and the exports. We provide information on land use change, so cropland and this includes cropland under different management systems, grassland, forest land, natural land, and different protected areas. We look at also the fertilizer application, the greenhouse gas emissions from crop and livestock production, and from land use change, and also the water for domestic, industrial, and irrigation purposes. Next slide, please. I would like to talk a little bit about the Scenario Explorer database, which we've been developing for Tools4CAP. So the Accelerator platform is a tool which aims to be a place for to bring together stakeholders, researchers, and policymakers. We aim to provide an in-depth visualization of projected national and supranational time series data and long-term scenario outputs, which allow users to download the different data from our repository. So here I provided a screenshot of the current state of the accelerator, where we're showing model output of production in the upper left-hand side for a few crop aggregates, and below that we have the production of wheat for different models that are providing information for the baseline projections. So the blue box here is giving you a dashboard viewer of how you can change the accelerator workspaces to look at different models, for example, different scenarios, different regions. So not just Europe, you can look at global, you can look at country levels, and you can look at that information also for different variables. So for production, for land use change, for consumption of different products, and also the different items. So you can look at crop aggregates or specific crop items if you want. We can, and sorry, one more. So just for information, the data for those images can be downloaded. The images themselves can also be downloaded, and they can be saved on the workspaces so that when users log in and log out, that the information is saved there for them as well. Okay, please, next slide. Sorry, thank you. And finally, on the last thing I want to say on my side is that we know that GLOBIOM is a tool that we can use to bridge the different scales from the global modeling to the national implementation of the different strategic plans. And we can examine how those plans fit within the context of the wider European policies and different targets. And now I want to hand it over to Juliana, who's going to talk about this three-way handshake and what it means for the context of the Czech Republic. So Juliana, please.
Thank you, Amanda. I hope that you are hearing me well. So I'm Juliana Arbelaez, and I'm a researcher at IIASA, as well as in the Czech Globe, the Global Change Research Institute of the Czech Academy of Science. And I would like to showcase a bit to you how we are foreseeing the analyses at the country level of the CAPRI strategic plan, using the Czech Republic as an example. So we will go to a bit of understanding how we could see the linkages between the CAPRI strategic plan as it is now and presented by member states, and then how we can use a model like GLOBIOM to support different assessments of the CAPRI strategic plan at the national level. So I think that it comes with no surprise that one of the strengths of GLOBIOM as a model is they're able to provide a lot of information for environmental and climate related indicators. This environmental and climate aspect in the CAPRI strategic plan is actually is the second more important aspect in the CAPRI strategic plan across all member states. And you could see that by the financial allocation of resources towards three specific objectives that encompass the environmental and climate objectives here. So those basically, I'm talking basically about the SO 4, 5, and 6. When we dig deeper into the case of Czechia or the Czech Republic, we see that the Czech Republic is expected to allocate almost 40% of the CAP CAP budget into interventions related to the environment. That's a 10% more than what the European Union in average is allocated to the environment. But I just wanted to showcase that the environment and all climate and environmental objectives related in the CAPRI strategic plans are indeed taking an important space in the policy, and they are relevant for the majority of the member states. Which is also the case of the Czech Republic. As you see, this type of modeling frameworks are large and requires a bit of resources to be able to implement or run at the national level and develop the capacities nationally to be able to host such model and help the policy process from a national perspective. So the Czech Republic has been leveraging a national research interest led by Czech Globe in understanding the impacts of global change in a small country like the Czech Republic, that it's embedded in different market dynamics. First one, the one regionally with the European Union, and of course then globally for the global food markets. This is a cooperation that has been happening for over 6 years now and funded by different national projects, and recently also with a lot of support with different Horizon projects. And then we thought that it would be a great opportunity to showcase what we have been doing in the Czech Republic as part of the Tools4CAP project, and focusing on understanding a bit more how the CAP strategic plan assessment can be done in Czechia. So that's basically the objective of this case study within the Tools4CAP project. This work started last year with a first focus group, where we have the opportunity to talk with people from different stakeholder groups in the country, including national authorities, including the USAI Institute, which is the Agroeconomic Institute in the Czech Republic, and also the farmers with the representation of the Agrarian Chamber of South Moravia participating in the focus group. We'd introduce them a bit about the project and also a bit about GLOBIOM, and try to gather their insights on how such tool could be used by stakeholders as such to support their process in the next cycle of the CAP strategic plan. And we are finalizing right now the case study plan, and we are expecting to implement the holistic assessment of the national CAP strategic plan in the next in the next 7 months during the 2025, and in that with a focus group in the second semester of 2025. And I'm just saying this in case anything that you see here is relevant for you and you would like to participate more in all the activities that we are foreseeing within the case study in the Tools4CAP project. So I think that one thing that we have been spending some time on is trying to map the linkages between the specific objectives that we have in the policy, the different result indicators that are related to those specific objectives that are focused on the environment and climate objectives, and then try to reconcile those indicators with GLOBIOM outputs and see how GLOBIOM could inform better whether the result indicators are accomplished or not. So if you don't know, every member state and have established already some targets for those specific result indicators. So we do have, let's say, a trajectory that we want to achieve as the implementation of the CAP is happening in the countries, especially in the case of the Czech Republic. So the results indicators that you see here that they are in bold are actually the result indicators that are explicit considered in the Czech agricultural strategic plan. And then we have a mapping of all the outputs that GLOBIOM could provide to actually assess whether the implications of the implementation of the CAP strategic plan, specifically on the environment and climate-related interventions. So as you can see, we couple a lot on the parts of climate change. GLOBIOM is able to provide a lot of information related to the emissions for both the crop and livestock products, land use change emissions related as well as is able to introduce planned and autonomous adaptation for the agricultural and forestry sector. And that's regarding the first objective, that is more related to climate change mitigation and adaptation. For the second one, that is more focused on the use of resources. So I think that here GLOBIOM is able to provide results that could support the results indicator assessment in regards of use of land, water, and of course fertilizers. That there are three important resources for assessing the state of water resources, soil and chemical dependency in the member states. And finally, We also could supply or could provide more information regarding the land use and land use changes driven by the implementation of the CAP strategic plan, but also driven by market interactions and different effects, not only happening at the country level, but also at the regional level, like the European Union level, and broadly as well, transmitted through price effects from the global markets. Now I would like to share with you some of the results. Those results are preliminary and come, of course, for the work that we have done before with GLOBIOM when we start using this model in the Czech Republic. One of the key questions when we started working together between Czech Global IIASA was to find out whether a global model and a global framework like GLOBIOM actually makes sense to be used for ex-ante analysis in small countries like the Czech Republic. So here you could see a scientific exercise that we did to try to answer that question. Basically, what you could see in the graph, you will see three different box plots with three different colors. The purple one, it's dedicated to understand the impacts of climate change on Czech agriculture when only impacts of climate change are considered nationally. That resembles the status quo practice of assessing climate change as just the country level. I think that just the country, in this case, Czech Republic, is being impacted by climate change, but there is no climate change happening in the rest of the world, which is, of course, an ideal situation that is not reflecting how actually climate change impacts the food agrosystems. The green one is the green box plot. The gray box plots are when we consider at least regional climate change impacts. So here we are considering that the whole European Union is impacted by climate change, and the yellow box plot is when the whole globe is impacted by climate change. So we see that the full global market of agricultural products, it's impacted differentially by climate change. These impacts of climate change, of course, they are GLOBIOM is coupled with other different biophysical models to provide information on how the climate change impact is distributed among crops, among regions, and of course we included then in a way that how differentially climate change impacts the global agro-food systems. And here, which I just wanted to display it a bit for you to notice that when we do not include impacts in the rest of the world, the dynamics domestically change broadly, especially when we look at how the agricultural production in Czechia will respond to that and will adapt to that. So in this case, we see that there is large changes in the results, for example, in area, because area becomes an adaptation strategy for the Czech agricultural sector to the negative impacts of climate change, meaning that the Czech agriculture will tend to expand in area when impacts of when climate change is impacting globally the agro-food systems, and then that can give us a hint on how actually even international markets are relevant to small countries like the Czech Republic, and I know that that's the case for many many member states that are here represented. Moving forward, I wanted to show two types of outputs that could be used for understanding a bit more the opportunities, the synergies, and of course the trade-offs of the CAP strategic plan indicators when we are considering climate change, because that's an additional dimension that it's added to the complexity of ex-ante analysis of policies, is that policies are not just happening in the back end of the policy process, but they are also impacted by different global change aspects such as climate change, and as Thomas mentioned in his presentation, also socioeconomic changes. So here I just wanted to show how a well-known strategy as an irrigation for the agriculture, a well-known adaptation strategy as an irrigation for agricultural agricultural sector will play a role when we do consider climate change impacts on both the yields of the crops, but also the availability of water resources for irrigation, which is really crucial, as you see right now when we are linking this back to the CAP strategic plans, that the sustainable use of water resources is still at the core of the environment and climate-related objectives. So yes, irrigation could be potentially an adaptation strategy beyond just the south of Europe, but we need to be mindful on knowing the limits of the biophysical limits of the resources to be able to create or implement strategies that are both sustainable, environmental sustainable, but that also provides a gain or an opportunity to buffer out the negative effects of climate change. So in this case, GLOBIOM combines hydrological information and crop model information to be able to create those limits of those biophysical constraints to know exactly when we have a gain on irrigated yields. And then when those irrigated yields perform better within the market conditions that Amanda explained earlier, then do we have enough water to guarantee that we have that gain of yield and therefore a positive impact in production. So that's a bit what I'm showing here. So here I'm showing three color box plots with different ambitions on adaptation, whether we keep adaptation just as we are just without any additional plan adaptation, a bit more low adaptation, and a bit more ambition adaptation, and how is the behavior of irrigation in that case. Every box that you see here represents different level of warming of climate change. So the RCP 7.0 is a reality with climate change where the warming level is higher, and you could see that immediately when you see the plot, the first question that jumps into your mind is like, oh, but the water used for irrigation actually is not the highest under the higher warming level scenario, and that's because of the biophysical constraint that we are putting there, because also at the highest warming level scenario, water resources are also impacted. Therefore, there is less water available for irrigation in the Czech Republic to uptake more the irrigation as an adaptation expansion. So I just wanted here to just showcase a bit that this holistic thinking makes sense when we start talking about these environmental and climate related aspects. And lastly, I wanted to also show the same here about, so we are in the same level of warming as the figure before and the same adaptation strategies here. But then I wanted to showcase here, for example, the relation between climate mitigation and climate adaptation strategies, that sometimes those ambitions can be optimized together in the way that we are not only providing adaptation strategies for the agricultural sector and the production in those countries, but also taking into account different climate mitigation potentials. So I just wanted to show that here and showcase that, of course, uptaking irrigation as adaptation strategies have an effect on the climate mitigation potential, because that could lead to specifically in this plot changes in the land use in the country, and we need to be mindful of the associated emissions to that, for example, that specific adaptation strategy. And here I just wanted to give you a more in detail type of greenhouse gas emissions that we have explicit considered in GLOBIOM, and I think that that of course they represent pretty well the emissions related to the agricultural and to the land-based sectors in general. And it's of course important that once again when assessing the impacts of policies such as the CAP strategic plan at the country level, we'd consider the complexities that the environment and climate entails. And I think that here will be just my final remarks, trying to invite you all to sort of interact with us further and invite you to this, let's say, collaborative thinking that the accelerator brings to the table. We know that sometimes the capacities to run these such models is difficult to accomplish, but therefore we could think of ways that we can come together and cooperate in understanding, for example, the outputs of the models and try to support the analysis at the country level with the outputs that we already produce in all the work that have been going within the modeling groups to implement the CAPRI strategic plans and to make sense of the CAPRI strategic plans in terms of, for example, the results indicators and different interventions. So yes, I think that that's one of the key takeaways from this presentation, that the Scenario Explorer is therefore an opportunity to do that and to try to support the national level analysis in a way that is more collaborative, and it can involve different stakeholders, including academia from the national member states, but also policymakers at both level, national and European level. And I just also a final message that I would like to bring here is that exploring the implications of policies such as the CAP in a global consistent framework brings additional value not only to, let's say, more key players in the European agricultural sector, let's say like France or Spain, but also to small member states like the Czech Republic, as I just showcased here. Thank you so much, and I hope that you will have many questions for us.